Hello there, I'm Claire Barnard. Welcome to this MedWire News podcast for Medicine Matters Rheumatology. The COVID-19 Global Rheumatology Alliance registry has now launched for healthcare providers to enter data about their rheumatology patients with COVID-19. We spoke to Philip Robinson, chair of the steering committee for this registry, to find out more about it. Philip is a senior staff specialist at the Royal Brisbane Hospital and associate professor at the University of Queensland in Australia. Philip discusses how the registry came about, what type of data the Alliance plan to collect and analyse, and what rheumatologists are being asked to do. Okay, so Philip, could you tell me why it's important to have this COVID-19 rheumatology registry?
So this is a pretty unprecedented event in the lives of most rheumatologists in that we haven't really had a viral pandemic that's been so widespread and affected so many people in so many countries. And the relevance for rheumatologists is that many of our patients have disorders of the underlying immune system, and many patients also are on immunosuppressant or immunomodulatory treatment. And so for all of those reasons, potentially a viral pandemic might be of special concern because it might mean that our patients are more at risk of more severe disease or worse outcomes.
So what are the main aims of the registry?
So we want to collect information about rheumatology patients, so that's all the different conditions in rheumatology, and how they fare when they become infected. So that's trying to get at the question of, is there an issue with patients who have underlying immune disorders and how they deal with the disease? And then along with that, and often combined with that, we want to know about patients who are on immune suppressive treatments, because they have the ability to alter how you deal with the virus. And so we're interested in all of those different patient groups to see how they go when they get infected.
How did you go about setting this registry up?
It was really a meeting of the minds over Twitter, really. There was Leo Calabresi, who's at Cleveland, tweeted about the fact that the IBD, then there was an IBD group that had done this and said, are we doing this in rheumatology? And it was myself and Janusi Asdani from UCSF and a number of others sort of talking about this. And essentially we just said, look, no one's doing this, let's just get on and do it. So it was very much a sort of discussion amongst people who were concerned about it and thinking about it on Twitter. And then it was the snowball coming down the hill, really. It just got bigger and bigger and more people got involved in more organizations. And that's where we are today, really. 17 days on, really, that's where we are today.
And what are the similarities between this registry and the IBD one? Are they quite similar to each other?
So we've actually ended up expanding. I'm not very familiar with what's happening behind the IBD registry, but they're certainly wanting to collect information about IBD patients who are on immunosuppressive therapies. But we're doing that, and we are engaging with patient groups about surveys about patients, and also we have our own patient survey. We're also doing literature reviews, trying to answer some of the questions. Do our medications cause, or is there evidence in the literature that our medications cause problems? Or is there the potential that our medications are in fact helpful in the face of COVID-19? And then we're also, we're in the early stages of engaging with payers in the United States to say, well, they've got a pretty unique perspective because they can clearly see when they're paying ICU bills, and they can clearly see when they're paying bills for things like our rheumatology drugs, say biologics or methotrexate, and so that they have a good view about when their patients with immune disorders end up in ICU. Now, you don't have the fine scale medical information that you would have when you get the physician to report it, but certainly it's an aspect of information, because each different way of collecting information, either from doctors, from patients, or from payers, administrative data, is going to be it's going to have its strengths and weaknesses. And so, for example, patients might be able to report mild or asymptomatic infections. Doctors are more likely to report infections that end up in front of them in hospital or ICU, and payers are going to potentially have a view across both of those events. So we're doing that as well, and we're in the early stages of forming more comprehensive patient committees who are thinking about things like patient information, and thinking about the different ways that we could help patients, because this is a scary thing for patients who are on these types of medications or have these disorders, because we don't have good information, and we've been very clear we don't have good information, and so that can be unsettling for patients. So we want to try and support them where possibly we can with good sources of information, because as I'm sure you're aware, there's a lot of misinformation out there on the internet, and it's really hard for your average patient to be able to sift through that and find the scientifically valid information. Now, the answer might be we don't have information, but it's better to know that than to be deceived into thinking that there are cures or other things that are out there that they should be trying to get hold of.
Okay, so you're planning to get data from lots of different sources, like from the doctors, from the patients, from the payers. How do you plan to analyse this data when you've gathered a bit more?
So we have a data analytics group that is led by some statisticians in UCSF as part of Janusi Anstani's group, and they're engaging with epidemiologists and statisticians as part of the EULAR collective as well. So we are bringing in lots of expertise to think about the ways that we can analyse this rapidly. We're also trying to automate some of the reporting. So in a way, we don't have to manually go through things and report things. We can sort of say, okay, we'll generate report on our patients or on the registry today. This is what it shows. And then it requires the least amount of legwork each time we do that. So those are all things that are in early stage investigation, but we set up a data analytics group last week. So they've been working on these things for at least a week.
So when you have the data, how will it be available to other rheumatologists?
One of the really important aspects that we really have our obligation to do extremely well in a very thought out way is to report in a way that doesn't create harm. Because as you can imagine, if we start reporting data in a way that's potentially interpretable, say this medication, all the cases we have of this medication, these patients are all in ICU or doing badly, or this medication, they're all doing well. Because of the way that the study is designed or the data is being collected, we are not able to really get a good overview about all of them. So we may see that we have, say, 20 cases of rheumatoid on patient who are taking drug A and they're all in ICU, but we're not actually capturing the 400 cases of rheumatoid on drug A who are at home. We need to think carefully about the way that we are reporting this data to make sure that it doesn't actually lead to conclusions that are going to lead to actions that potentially are going to have negative effects. So we are carefully thinking about how we're going to report these things. We are hoping to report our first series of cases probably next week, and we are currently sorting out how we're going to do that. It's going to be very general, and to try and avoid this issue until we get more data and until we sort of see the lie of the land, so to speak, and what sort of data we're getting, then it's going to be easier to see how we can think about reporting things in a way that's helpful. And if I just update you, as of right now, we currently have 56 patients that have been reported in the registry. Now that's likely to be across a variety of different diseases. So, we may actually only have maybe 10 or 15 rheumatoid patients in there and some other psoriatics and lupuses. So our initial reporting will be general, but it will be with an aim to try and provide information that's in a balanced way, that's able to at least provide some information to practitioners and to patients about how our patients are faring when they get infected.
Looking a bit forward into the future, what kind of studies do you anticipate coming about as a result of the data available from your registry?
So, although we are aiming to try and reduce the burden on practitioners reporting information, it's actually surprising how much data you can get from someone in a 5 to 10 minute survey. And so, if we were to think about the richness of all the different data that we're getting, so we, just to provide people with an overview, we're collecting demographic data, age, gender, ethnicity, and then diagnoses and medications, details about their infection, and details about their outcome. So you can see that, what's going to come out of this. Well, we can cut this many different ways. We can say, well, how do rheumatoid patients go, on with infection? And then regardless of what your underlying diagnosis are, how do patients on methotrexate go? Or thinking about bringing in different strands. So if we think about what patients report and what payers report and what doctors report, are all these things consistent with each other? And why are we seeing differences between these groups? Now we can clearly speculate why we'd see differences, and is this giving us some information? Are patients reporting milder disease and payers and doctors reporting more severe disease? Is that giving us a full picture, or we think is a full picture? So with the amount and depth and richness of the data we're getting, we're actually able to ask lots of questions that give us some idea about what the spectrum of answers might be. And I suppose to some degree, this is more about giving us ideas about potentially going ahead and doing more rigorous studies, because if we see some interesting patterns in the data, we can go, that's really interesting that we're seeing that patients on mycophenolate, well, they get sick and they go to hospital, they never go to ICU. Is there something about, that's, as an example, that's not based on data, is there something about mycophenolate that protects you from getting more sick than what you would? And so then we can actually go away and say, well, is there something in the literature that helps us? Is there something in the literature that says that, it doesn't really affect you from initial infections, but it protects you from the more severe manifestations of the disease? And then we can actually say, okay, well, maybe this is going to precipitate a completely separate study where we go and look at patients who are on mycophenolate and actually deep dive into some of the more different aspects, because, at big institutions, they might have 20 or 30 patients on mycophenolate who've been admitted. Or we can, with the networks that we've created, we can then say, okay, well, let's try and pull in and do a deep dive on 100 or 200 mycophenolate patients and really try and answer this question. So it's not just what the data from the registry is able to give us. It's the ideas and the clues and the epidemiological patterns that can then say, that we can then scratch our head and say, now, why is this? And then answer the next question, and then design a study that's going to better enable us to get a more definitive answer to answer the anomaly that we've seen in the registry data.
So when rheumatologists are talking to their patients, what do you think are the main things they should say to their patients if asked about this registry?
Well, I think rheumatologists should be clear that we are not collecting patient identifiable information. So patients should be reassured that no one's going to be able to identify who they are based on the information that has been put into the registry. And secondly, I think that patients should be reassured that this has been examined by multiple different institutional review boards or ethics committees and has been given clearance for us to continue from both the United States, Europe, and in a wide variety of other countries around the world. And we continue to work on those clearances. And the third thing is that this is about generating data that we sincerely hope will improve the care of patients. So although a rheumatology patient who might be infected has their data put into the registry, they are helping build the knowledge about how patients like them respond. And, potentially they can benefit from that, and they can benefit their other patients who have the same diseases that they have. So I think that they should be reassured that it's a safe thing to have their data put into, and it's got the potential to benefit them and other patients with rheumatic diseases who are on rheumatic treatments.
Okay, so right now, at the time the registry's just launched, what are you asking rheumatologists to do?
So we are well aware that rheumatologists at this current time may be called on to provide care for COVID patients. And so we are saying if you are able and you do have patients who you are aware of who either have rheumatic disease and who may be on immunosuppressant drugs, if you're able, go to the website, spend 5 or 10 minutes reporting them to us to enable us to turn around and provide you, as part of the information that you have provided, report it back to you and say, well, thinking about your data and a whole lot of other data as well, this is what's happening. So it is to an individual's doctor's benefit to report data, because the power is going to be in everyone reporting data. So the form should take between 5 and 10 minutes, depending on the complexity. And look, if people aren't able to report all of the detail, there are mechanisms to go back later on and fill in more data and update patients' outcomes as they go along. So if people are only able to report a little bit of it, well, that's great, and we've got the mechanisms to update that. And so if you're able, we would really love it if you would do that. And the second thing is we would really love it if you were able to tell your colleagues about it, because the more people that are aware of it, the more people have the potential to be able to report data into the registry.
You can find out more about the COVID-19 Global Rheumatology Alliance registry and the links for entering data at rheum-covid.org. Medicine Matters Rheumatology will be covering the latest research on COVID-19 in patients with rheumatic diseases, so keep an eye on rheumatology.medicинematters.com for updates. Thank you very much to Philip for talking to us about the registry, and thank you to you for listening.